Hi, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about chapter 2 in the book of John. And from chapter 1, we know that Jesus now has 5 disciples with him. One being Andrew. Then we have Peter, also known as Cephas. Remember Cephas? And Philip, Nathaniel, and the fifth one still remains unnamed. So we know he existed, but his name is just not important. I guess it's not given. Uh, and they leave Galilee at the end of chapter 1. But we know that they don't go far because at the beginning of chapter 2, it starts like 3 days later because it says it exactly on the third day. They get invited to a wedding that's held in Cana, Galilee. And that is, or Cana, Galilee, sorry. It's Cana. So Cana, Cana, depends on how you want to pronounce it, but that's how it's spelled. So they get invited to this wedding. His mother's invited, and they decide to go. So they're all like having a good time, grooving on the dance floor. And his mother, verse 3, his mother comes up to him and says, they have no more wine. And it was kind of like a plea, like, Jesus, they have no more wine. And Jesus replies in verse 4, Dear woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come. And at first I was a little thrown back by this, like, why wouldn't Jesus, jump to their aid, he's Jesus, he wants to help people. But then it occurred to me that maybe he was a little hesitant because he wanted people, Jesus wanted people to follow him for the word of God and to fall in love with God and not fall in love with his miracles and what he does. More or less focused on what he is and what he says and the preaching and the teachings that he gives. So by performing a miracle so early on in his life, he was probably afraid of people getting wind of this and following him for his miracles and for what he does and not paying much attention to what he says. Because once you hear his word and once you become a believer, that's when God works miracles in your life, and Jesus heals your sons and brings people from the dead, which we'll learn about later on. But if you're curious about it, it's also in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So anyway, so that's why he responds that way. But next to them, coincidentally, was the servants that were, serving the food for the party. And his mother goes, hey, do whatever he says. And she points to Jesus. And the servants are like, okay. And Jesus points to 6 water jars, or stone water jars, against the wall that hold 20 to 30 gallons apiece. And he said to fill them up with water. So the servants, okay, filled them up with water to the brim and brought them to Jesus. And let's just think about that. That's 20, it says 20 to 30 gallons. So let's just say that they hold about 25 gallons apiece. That's 6 jars, 25 gallons. That would be 150 gallons of water. That is a lot of water. A lot of water. And I imagine them being really heavy too. How many servants would it take to carry one jar that holds 20, 30 gallons of water? I can barely hold a gallon of milk. So I see these big men, couple of them, carrying these water jugs. And Jesus turns them into he instructs them to serve it out to the customers, and they don't know, they think they're serving water, but they serve it and it turns out to be wine. And in verse 10, the guests of the party, they reply, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink, but you have saved the best till now. So I picture the party winding down. People are looking for more wine, and there's no more wine, so they're gathering their stuff, and then all of a sudden the champagne bottle, except there's no champagne, but the champagne bottle pops, and And like the wine like is poured in every glass, and the music turns back up, and everybody's like, woo! And the party's kicking for another like 5-6 more hours till 5 in the morning or something crazy like that. But I also do imagine that the guests or the parents of the couple and the couple themselves got to take some of that amazing wine home with them, because 150 gallons, like, do you really think, I mean, maybe 1,000 people could consume that much, but I still imagine there being just a little left over for them to enjoy later after the party ends. So it goes, the chapter, a little bit further in the chapter, it says in verse 13, after this, he went down to Capernaum. It's pronounced C-A-P, or spelled, sorry, Capernaum. I don't really know how to pronounce that. Capernaum? And with his mother and brothers and his disciples, where they stayed for a few days. And when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, so like right before the Jewish Passover, Jesus went to Jerusalem and to the temple courts. And this is kind of like a place where I imagine Jesus would feel most comfortable, because it is like God's house, you know, so it's like his Father's house. He can go in there and just worship. So he enters this temple with hopes that like he could like worship and get closer, you know, before the Passover, just like renew his faith and everything. But he goes in there and he sees a table of men trading money, and another table of men like trading goats and cows, and then there's a table of a man selling doves. And I think that's what really like sets off Jesus the most, is the doves. Well, not probably the most, but it kind of like compiled. But he says to the man that was selling the doves in verse 16, get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market? But I think he was actually talking to everybody in the market, which was like kind of really upsetting in a way. I mean, it's close to the Passover. You're really supposed to be, you know, humbling yourself and everything. And instead, these people are selling and trading goods in God's house. Like, wow. So Jesus kind of goes not crazy, but he gets really upset and he starts flipping over tables. Now, when I first read it, I was like, okay, flipping over tables. But you have to really think, like, people were in the middle of trading, like, money, okay? And he comes and flips their table, and I just see, like, coins going everywhere. And a person that had, like, maybe, like, 2 coins to start with is, like, trying to, like, grab his 2 coins and, like, whatever else he can touch. But, like, the person who had 10 coins is just like, no, don't touch my coins. Shove, punch, kick, possibly. I mean, over money, maybe. There was even, like, a quarrel going on in the corner. And people were scrambling to get their money. And so that, I don't know, just that image of chaos in God's house is just, it wasn't really aware, like, I wasn't aware of it until after, like, I read the scripture and I took a step back and I really thought about it. So, and towards the end of, or I'm going to skip back, I'm sorry, towards the end of the wedding part, it says in verse 11, this, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory to his disciples, and they put their faith in him. So, kind of backtracking, sorry. The miracle of turning water into wine really helped his disciples, like, believe. And it kind of, it's interesting to think that humans need, like, proof like that, you know? I mean, what strengthens our faith in Jesus? Is it the miracles that we see working in our lives, or is it just us reading about miracles that happen to other people? Because these people, like, knew of Jesus, They knew what he could do, but then they didn't like quite believe and put their trust in him until they saw him perform his first miracle. So I kind of wonder what I would do if I was in that situation. I feel like I would probably be the same way. I was like, well, I really have nothing else better to do with my life. And this guy, he seems really cool, and I kind of like want to follow him. I'm drawn to him, so let's go. And then, like 3 days later, we go to this wedding, and he does like water the wine, and I'm just like, whoa, that's pretty freaking cool. And like, then I would trust him. Um, so that's just something to think about. Sorry. So fast forward into the temple and the destroying and everything. He ends this chapter, John ends this chapter with verse 24 through 25, and it says, after this is said after he, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all men. He did not need men's testimony about men, for he knew what was in men. So he didn't need like testimony of, oh, this guy's a good guy, Jesus, you should trust him, because obviously he's Jesus and he knows who's good and who's bad, and he knows who he can trust and who he can't trust. And although these people like trusted him because they saw his miracles that he worked, like he didn't put like his he didn't need their testimony, which really like, I don't know, it really like says something about Jesus and like what he stands for. So I thought that was a nice way to end chapter 2. I like really want to read chapter 3, but it's a long one, so this next video is gonna go a little bit further in depth. Hopefully not longer than like 15 minutes, but it should be fairly fun. So stay tuned, and I look forward to seeing you guys later. Oh, and feel free to click the button the link in the discussion bar, because it's a link to my blog, and I further discuss what we go over in the video if you're interested. So I